Now, listen, could you give us a quick thumbnail sketch? I'm interested in the world of logistics in both the military and in business. But could you maybe give us some key similarities and differences between those two environments in which you've worked?
Sure. And, let's sort of reflect upon the similarities for just a moment. So a bit like any environment, one of the key things about supply chain is how you choose to define it. And if you take the broadest definition, meaning end to end from point of extraction through to manufacture, through consumption, ultimate utilization, and then the reverse logistics for end of life management, then in some regards, this is the same problem that all organizations have. And the challenges around end-tier supplier integration, so understanding what your supply base is, who it comprises of, where are they located, what risks you have within that, is pertinent whether you are manufacturing fighter jets or whether you're manufacturing training ships. The challenge is the same for both of them. And that is that in the end, your tier one supply base, those that are closest to you, you have a good billing relationship with them. You've got a good personal relationships with them. You understand who they are. You understand the contractual obligations. But getting behind that tier one, getting into the tier threes, the tier fours, that's hard because there are contractual reasons why your suppliers are not going to want to expose who the various components are, which means that ultimately you can have a huge amount of overlap at that level. So you might have, all of the tier one suppliers using the same tier four supplier for a particular widget. And that, of course, exposes you to risk that you can't see. So from that aspect, a huge amount of similarity in terms of the supply base. The other thing that is remarkably similar is to do with finance, and it's to do with the funding of your procurement strategy. And whether you are dealing with a business that is required to remain profitable, or whether you're doing business with a public sector organization that is held to account by the taxpayer, the same challenges are true. Are you procuring using a capital expenditure sort of model where you're effectively trying to buy the entire thing upfront in one payment or one transaction or one known cost? Or are you procuring using a use by or how could we describe it? A pay-per-use model. And if you reflect upon the industry that I'm now focused on, cloud computing, especially at the AWS remit, is very much a pay-per-use model. And that is a fundamental difference from how most people are accustomed to procuring things like their technology. So I share that because this is true whether you're trying to purchase a fighter jet, whether you're going to lease the number of hours that it's going to provide, are you going to buy the jet outright and do the full servicing yourself, et cetera, et cetera. All of those are very similar, whether you're talking about military aspects or civil. Other things that are also very similar is to do with the individuals and the involved in the management of the supply chain and the logistics. These are not different beasts. They tend to be people that are very analytical in nature. They tend to have a very clear view as to the data requirements, and they tend to want to manage things in a data way. And I say tend to want to quite deliberately, because more often than not, entire operations are actually underpinned by one critical tool, and that is Microsoft Excel. So you can have mass operations where we are talking about the movement of large quantities of people, maybe for a humanitarian operation, or you could be talking about a multi-billion-dollar business that is involved in moving bulk fuel around the world. In both of those cases, when you really dig into the detail, what you tend to find is that despite all the sophisticated planning software, tools, and applications that exist, in the end, you've got column A to column Z with a whole bunch of rows and people making up various macros to evaluate what's going on. Ultimately, the problem with that is that because your entire operation is underpinned by Excel, is that you have all sorts of issues with data sharing, data quality, and that ultimately causes tribal knowledge and tribal challenges when it comes to then subsequently managing the strategic operation that you're involved in. So I share that because all of the similarities, both the positives and the negatives, exist. In terms of key differences, well, there are industries that have got parallels with defense, but if we focus on one ultimate difference is that in a business, it's about profitability. And therefore, that profitability can drive things like inventory optimization. So if you take an organization world renowned for inventory optimization, such as the motor industry, automotive, what you'll find there is that just on time is critical. But in a military context, just on time would always be too late, because we don't know what's going to happen, and therefore we have to store to a contingency planning. So what we end up with is detailed contingency plans and the ability to hold large quantities of inventory on hand just in case. There are challenges with that, but I'm sure you'll think some of those out with me in a moment. So that would be a key difference, is that the bulk storage of inventory is something that would be problematic for most industry. Now, I don't want to be oversimplifying, because the truth is the huge majority of organizations in the defense space are civil organizations, all of whom will seek to optimize their own inventory. So I'm talking specifically about military, supply chain, military logistics in this grasp. The other aspect is that in the civil context, an awful lot of what's going on are knowns. So we know where the stores are. We know where our distribution centers are. We know the paths that we can take to travel between them. We know the quantity of trucks available, etc., etc. Where in a military context, it's entirely possible, if we're talking about a fluid operation, that we don't yet know where the warehouses are going to be. We don't yet know which paths and routes we can take. We don't yet know which paths and routes are currently safe to move along. And we also have challenges around optimizing inventory. But what is also problematic there is that human lives are at risk in every logistics operation that we conduct. And whether we look at counterinsurgency operations where logistics patrols are heavily targeted, or whether you look at sort of more full-scale war, if you look at what's happening with Russia and Ukraine today, what you will also see is that the logistics nodes are fundamentally targeted, whether that be main supply routes, MSRs, or whether that be critical components such as bridges, infrastructure such as railway terminals, or indeed even the logistics posts themselves. So in those instances, you could have your inventory destroyed. You could be denied the ability to use particular bridges, paths, routes, and vehicle movements. So from that perspective, that is a fundamental difference between the military and civil context.